So welcome to another episode of Feature Fridays, and today we're joined by Data and York. So Data, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Data. I am the product manager for Tenant App and all the costing related features in vRealize.
Thanks, Data. And York?
Yeah, I'm York. I work as a technical product manager in VMware's Cloud Provider Business Unit.
Thanks, York. And for those who don't know me, my name is Guy Bartram. I'm a product marketing manager for the Cloud Director portfolio and suite. And today, thank you very much, guys, for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about the Tenant App and what Tenant App is and some of the advanced charging and metering capabilities of the Tenant App. So, as people may or may not know, with Cloud Director 10.1 came out, and then we had Tenant App 2.4. You right, York? Ooh, York, you okay?
Did we lose the audio?
I think my laptop just crashed. If you still can hear me.
Yeah.
Do you have the recording on already? It doesn't.
Yeah, I just started.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay, so welcome to Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram. I'm Product Marketing Manager for the Cloud Director portfolio. And today I'm delighted to be joined by York and Data. So Data, why don't you give us a quick introduction to yourself?
Hi, I'm Data. I'm the product manager for Tenant App and all the costing and pricing related functionalities implemented in vRealize operations.
Cool, thanks. And York?
Yeah, I'm York. I work as a technical product manager in VMware's Cloud Provider Business Unit.
Excellent, thank you. And today we're going to talk about the Tenant App, and specifically we're going to go into some of the capabilities around the advanced metering and billing. So for those who don't know, Cloud Director 10.1 came out a little while ago now, about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And actually, by the time this goes out, it'd probably be best to say that it came out in April. And Tenant App came out, I think it was just before that, with 2.4. And some really great new functionality in Tenant App. And today we're going to dive into some of the functionality around conditioning, pricing policies, and how we can differentiate the metering capabilities in Tenant App. So Data, just over to you. With the 2.4 release, what new capabilities were exposed to users, administrators of the Tenant App?
Sure. So before 2.3, we enabled the service providers to charge for basic infrastructure constructs, such as you could charge for every vCPU, every gigahertz, every GB of RAM, and so on. What we loaded into 2.4 were all the advanced pricing use cases. So, for example, you could do things like if you want to add a discount to all the VMs that are marked for a specific promo, you can do that using 2.4 now. If you want to do things like I want to charge differently based on the total amount of resources consumed on the VM, you could do that. So we added a bunch of features. I guess we'll go through into the details of each one of these as we go along. But basically the idea was to enable service providers to create some innovative business models on top of the infrastructure service that they're offering.
Sure, I understand. So I guess this was a kind of a mixture then of enhanced metric collection into vRealize operations for the Tenant App then to manipulate with these new calculations to produce the new capabilities. Would that be correct?
Yes, some part of it is monitoring new metrics and objects. But the major part of it is how do you post-process those metrics to come up with bill? That is where the enhancements went in.
And this is something that most service providers, have had to do today manually, do themselves in their own billing systems. How does this affect those guys if they've got existing billing capabilities and now Tenant App can present these capabilities for them?
Yeah. So that's a great question. In fact, we've seen service providers operate in typically 2 or 3 different ways. What service providers do is they read raw metrics, raw metering from the vRealize operations or Tenant App, do a bit of processing on top of it to, let us say, count the total number of vCPU hours a VM was alive through the month before feeding it to their billing system. We've seen typically billing systems are great at presenting bills, but not at this sort of pre-processing. So almost all service providers have this middle layer of pre-processing before feeding it to their billing system. Now, they do lots of different things here in this middle layer after reading these raw metrics. And that's the part we intend to simplify by enhancing our billing engine. Now, you don't have to read the raw metrics of every 5 minutes, what is the vCPU consumption. Instead, you could read the output of our billing engine by setting, let us say, a $1 per hour charge. The output that you get by setting such a rate is the total dollars will basically now amount to total number of vCPU hours that were consumed by the infrastructure. So you could use that as the pre-processing layer and feed the output directly.
So this would be then taking some of the load off the existing processing engines in their existing billing or BSS systems, right? Okay. And the type of functionality that's available in a billing system is typically highly flexible, but like you say, it's you're not going to get much out of the box, if anything, with those systems. That's all custom homegrown design. This then enables them to kind of piggyback, I expect, the capabilities that we've delivered, so they could get if you like, a quicker on-ramp for a service by taking the out-of-the-box Tenant App capability and utilizing that to do the pre-processing rather than having to write it themselves.
Correct. In fact, with 2.4, we are confident that many of the service providers may be directly be able to use our billing engine to meet most of their use cases. Maybe all that they will need on top of this is a presentation layer, which would either present the bills to tenants over a UI or a PDF format or whatever. But the actual billing use cases, I think most of them can now be met with 2.4 itself without the need for an external billing engine. For the ones who already have a billing engine, they could use it as the pre-processing layer and get the load off their custom scripts.
All right, so to be clear here, we're not talking about necessarily the presentation of the bill to the end customer. We're talking about just the pre-processing in this use case and the capabilities we can provide out of the box with Tenant App.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. And that data, how's that data then, once it's been pre-processed by the Tenant App, what methods are available to either expose it or push it into a billing system?
So there are 2 primary ways. One is Tenant App itself has one level of presentation layer which can be seen on the UI for all the bills that are generated. The other method, of course, is the API layer. That is, in case you already have a presentation layer built, you can use the APIs of Tenant App to pull all the processed information of how many dollars is to be charged to the tenant and simply put it on your billing layer for presentation purposes. Both these methods are available.
Okay, that's great. That's absolutely ideal then. So should we dive into the administrative side of the configuration data, and we can then kind of walk through some of the new aspects that are available in terms of the capabilities?
Sure.
So Jorg, I think you've got access to a system there, right?
Yeah, with that, let me share my screen to the Tenant App, and then we can define example pricing policy and talk about the different settings that we have there.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm connected here to the Tenant App screen as an provider administrator user. So that's the regular view where you have, well, all the dashboards with your ops information, but the important things that we want to have here is for the metering and chargeback. So in the configuration here, that's where you have access to the org VDCs where you can assign the pricing policies to. And of course, you can define the pricing policies and some additional configuration here. And that's where we, I guess, spent the rest of the time of this session to talk about the different options that we have here. So for demo purposes, let me just add a new pricing policy here. And then I think we can go step by step through the different sections and see what we have here. Okay. First of all, for the pricing policy, of course, you can have the pricing policy just for you as an information to align with the different allocation models that we have in Cloud Director. And since Tenant App 2.4, we also support the sizing policies. So that's the way for the new flex allocation model in Cloud Director, where you can define some sort of t-shirt sizes in your Cloud Director environment, attach them to the org VDC and then or to the templates, and then tenants can use the deploy VMs based on the sizing policies. And the settings, if we activate it here, you can see that the steps differ in the next thing. So that means you don't want to charge by actual usage, but by sizing policy, and then you would select the different pricing policies that you've defined in Cloud Director. But since we are now talking really about the advanced topics and details of what's possible, let's switch that back, and then I guess that let's just talk about the different settings we have for the different resources here.
Just before we go into that, when we're so if we're looking at an example environment where the service provider has an existing BSS system, the pricing policy itself, is that, and all of the associated attributes of that policy, is that available via API, so they could actually pull that across into their billing systems and use that as, this is the template that we're using for X service, so they can pull out the pricing policy, if you like?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the attached API guide along with Tenant App explains how to go about handling these pricing policies, all the CRUD operations on them.
Okay, great. And having the flex policy now supported is actually a big deal, right? Because I don't know where there would be a reason. Well, there are reasons, but there's few now to not use flex. It makes a lot more sense in terms of the consumption model. So I think having flex there is really great news. All right, so let's walk through this CPU rate piece then. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, let me start with the basic settings that have been there since ever in the Tenant App. First of all, you can select if you rather want to charge per vCPU count or per actual usage for the gigahertz. And then you can change your period for hourly, daily, or monthly billing. You can have a selection if you want to charge just for the existing of the virtual machine always, or only if it's powered on or have been powered on once. And then you can define base rate on a CPU count or gigahertz count. And what we have new in 2.4 is these base rate slabs, which allows you to do advanced modeling. So Data, can you give some examples where you would, as a provider, use these base rate slabs?
Sure, absolutely. Base rate slabs is also, we term it as volume-based pricing. So give you an example, right? Virtual machine, let's take vCPU count itself as an example. Creating virtual machines which consume 2 vCPUs to 4 vCPUs are sort of lightweight virtual machines, right? But creating larger virtual machines, let us say a 16 vCPU virtual machine, 16 to 32 vCPU virtual machine, is an overhead for the provider. So you may not want to linearly price, saying every vCPU it is $10, because after 16 vCPUs, it may become $15 per vCPU for you to host these VMs. The cost of these might be pretty high. In such cases, you would use what is called as the base rate slab. You would say that up to 8 vCPU VM, I'll charge at a standard rate of $1 per vCPU per day. But if the VM is more than 8 vCPU VM, then I would want to charge at $2 per vCPU per day. So that's the sort of setting that you can do. So like Jarek is configuring here, you say 9 2. So you see in the table below, it gives you description. If the usage is 9 vCPU and above, then a base rate of $2 will be applied. If not, by default, a base rate of $1 per vCPU per day will be applied. So that's the kind of thing that you can enable using this volume-based pricing.
Okay, and the
You
setting
can apply
here.
it on pretty much every resource.
Okay, and that setting here is just the new base rate that's used for VMs in this case that are 9 or more vCPU. So it's not a multiplier, but it's really a new base rate that is selected instead of the default base rate.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a common thing, I think, even based on feedback from that we got from service providers, to be able to have some more flexibility in charging more for larger VMs because they just create more overhead and are just cost more money in operating. And I think the same setting is here. Well, obviously, if you want to do that on a CPU gigahertz setting, it's the same idea. And I think we have the same principle also for memory configuration and memory.
Correct.
So if
we've seen reverse examples as well, just to close that topic. We've seen reverse examples as well where service providers want to offer discounts if VMs are created with higher amounts of storage. So if you create VMs with, purchase VMs with 50 GB of storage, I'll offer it to you at 1 cent per GB, 10 cents per GB. But if you are willing to purchase VMs of 100 GB and beyond, then I'll only charge you 8 cents per GB. So those kind of bulk discounts are also possible using this feature.
I'm just thinking out loud here. How does this correlate then to a kind of a reservation model? So if I had a reservation model for an 8 CPU like we had before, VM or gigahertz, whatever it might be, and you go over that, I'm not going to stop you going over that, but I'm going to charge you more, is what we're saying here, right?
Sure. So there is a slight difference though. What we are charging here is for allocation regardless.
Okay.
So if you create a 8 vCPU VM, I'll charge you this way. If you create a 16 vCPU VM, I'll charge you this way. We are still not talking about consumption.
Got it. Yep.
Right?
Okay.
We do have what you are asking for as well, and we term it as overage. And that's available only in allocation and reservation pool models because there you allocate and provide a minimum guarantee. We let you go beyond that minimum guarantee, but we let the providers charge differentially for whatever is the diff between minimum guarantee and what you're actually consuming.
Okay, and where is that in this pricing policy, the overage rate? Is that something that's available here?
Yeah, that's applicable if you change the...
Yeah, got it, right.
Yeah. In allocation pool, if you go to the next screen, you will see a section called overage here, which was not available earlier.
Yes.
In the second one, yeah, you can turn that on and say, what is the rate that you want to charge for the diff between minimum guarantee and actual consumption?
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. That's pretty flexible.
Yeah,
okay,
for the storage policies, we also have the option, of course, to charge based on storage policy. So you can define different price points or price rates depending on your storage tier or storage level that you offer to your tenants.
Okay, and that's already filling out the policies that are available based on what's available from the provider page, the PVDCs?
Yep.
Yep, okay.
Yes, that's true. So this allows you to charge differently for different qualities of storage. So if you have gold, silver, bronze kind of storage tiers, and that's how we are offering the storage to your tenants, you can say every GB from gold tier is 10 cents, whereas everything from silver tier is 8 cents. Everything from bronze tier is 5 cents per GB.
And if we just step back a bit to perhaps to you've got CPU, memory, storage, network. Do we have, I mean, I'm just trying to think of advanced billing kind of characteristics now in terms of, you know, like serverless functions are, you know, per transaction orientated. So what is the granularity that this will go down to for these kind of very IaaS-centric levers? And is there ability to go into something else like transactions and kind of build your own, if you like?
Yep, makes sense. And again, good question. So the focus of 2.4, okay, let's start with the baseline. The baseline is today, Tenant App is capable of charging VMs, edge devices, org VDCs, storage profiles, VApp templates. It does not have the ability to charge for any other objects. Right. Now, the focus of 2.4 was how flexible can we make, how flexible can we allow the pricing for these objects to be made. That was the focus of 2.4. In our roadmap, we do have features wherein we try to say, bring in your own object, tell us how do you want to bill for it, and we'll create a bill for you. So when that happens, it could be a serverless function, it could be a completely different custom object that you are bringing in, just associate it with an org VDC, tell us how do you want to bill it, show us which is the metric you want to bill it based on, we'll be able to bill for it. That's on our roadmap right now.
Okay, that's awesome.
What we have right now, though, already is a lot of flexibility when it comes to tag or metadata-based billing, and some additional rate factors and one-time fixed costs that we add and that we can talk through here. So with the vCenter tags, it allows you, or VCD metadata is pretty much the same screen at the same configuration, just depending on which metadata system you use to label virtual machines that either use or consume an additional service, or you want to just add some additional cost or change the pricing policy for that. That is something you can do in these generic settings here for the tag rates and metadata rates.
And what's the for the folks who don't know, what's the difference between the vCenter tags and VCD metadata?
That's just the place where this information is stored. So in VCD, you can add to quite every single object, like a VApp or an org VDC or whatever. You can add some metadata information, just some key value sort of data stored that you can attach. Typically, that is done during the provisioning or based on some automation processes that attaches the metadata information. For example, if a backup is created for this virtual machine and the backup service is enabled for a virtual machine. In vCenter, it's possible to create tags and tag categories for objects and then attach these tags to to objects in vCenter. It's just two different places where the information is stored. And depending on the way you automate that, or the way you have some third-party systems like backup systems that talk to vCenter, typically use vCenter tags for managing these backups and marking VMs that use the backups, then you can use both of these systems for within the Tenant App for your billing.
Okay, so where today you're getting metrics into vRealize operations, right? So memory, storage, network, those type of things. Those are existing capabilities in VCD and vCenter that are those metrics are being polled by vRealize operations. So I have a question about the granularity of that, especially when you're looking at things like storage. I noticed you had like hourly and things. So how does that kind of roll up an hourly figure, maybe, is the question I want to ask. And two, if I'm starting to use additional tags, is this then dynamic? This is obviously not using vRealize operations anymore. Is this now doing direct queries of vCenter or VCD? How does it pull the information out regarding those tags?
So regardless of where the information originates, all of them land in vRops, and the processing engine looks at this data that is collected into vRops and does the billing on top of it. So like Yorick mentioned, the vCenter tags come from vCenter. Metadata comes from vCloud Director. Both of these are collected and stored inside VROps alongside rest of the objects and metrics.
Okay.
The billing engine simply looks at these metadata and does what it is programmed to do. Yeah, that's part of your question. To answer your first part question of granularity, right? Most of the metrics that we are talking about here are collected from their source systems on a 5-minute at a 5-minute granularity. So we track changes at the finest granularity of if the configuration of a vCPU changes, if the utilization of a VM changes, all of those are tracked at a 5-minute granularity. Pricing, the way it works is, the billing, the way it works is, at the end of every day, it can go back and ask what happened today and let me bill for it. So the frequency of the billing itself happens once per day. The calculations happen once per day, but they can basically look back in time through the day and process data which is present at 5-minute granularity.
Are they? Is something like storage utilization then 5-minute granularity chunks into an hour? Is it a roll up? Is it an average? Is it a min max? What's the kind of calculation used for the hourly? And as you extend the period beyond 5 minutes?
The calculations that are used are average over a period of time for most of these metrics.
Okay, that's cool. So this capability here with vCenter tagging and VCD metadata, these are extremely powerful capabilities, because pretty much this is like an open field. You can put in whatever tags you want, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So you can use the key value concept for the tags or for metadata to put in whatever you want, and then either you have the selection to use a fixed rate, so you directly attach a certain number to a feature if a tag is available, or, and that's new in 2.4, you can even change the pricing policy. So if a certain tag is existing for a virtual machine, for example, you can define that for all the VMs that have this specific tag enabled, you alternate the pricing policy. One example for that is if you have some certain offerings where you have a discount for a certain service, then you want to get a cheaper pricing policy for VMs, or if it's VMs that rather belong to some service offering that is charged completely separately as part of a managed service offering, then you create some sort of a null pricing policy that's more or less for free, and then tag the VM and therefore exclude it from the regular pricing. So there are a lot of different options or scenarios where this metadata or tag-based pricing will be useful.
And what's the data? Go on.
Just to add, because this is such a powerful construct, right? I just want to take 2 more minutes on this.
Sure.
So there are several scenarios that we have seen our service providers make benefit out of this. The simplest one being, I am running the software inside the VM and I want to charge for it, right? In such a case, what we recommend them to do is say SQL server equal to true as your metadata, as and when you are provisioning the VM, and come here and say if metadata SQL server equal to true, add a fixed rate per month of $100, right? Now this is how you can overload your software charges of the VM and then expose it to your consumers, that being the simplest case. There could be other advanced scenarios like Yorick mentioned. Let us say some VMs are asking for gold quality support. That's a manual support that you are providing, and hence you charge them very differently than you would charge normal VMs because those are mission critical and so on, right? So there is a separate pricing policy altogether. So now you can construct a scenario where if you have 1,000 VMs under your pay-as-you-go org VDC, you are charging 900 of them regularly using your usual pricing policy. But because 100 of them require gold quality support, you tag them saying that these are gold quality support VMs. I want to charge them twice as much, let's say. and you set a separate pricing policy altogether, and you point to that pricing policy for whichever VM is tagged with it. So with this, you can play around quite a bit on how you want to differentially price different VMs.
Got it. And there was a priority, I think it was on the last screen that you're on. You're going to ask what the alternative pricing. So what's the priority here?
Yeah, right. So because metadata is such a loose construct, you can have things that are overlapping. I mean, the same VM may be tagged with both SQL Server and let's say Gold support. So this goes to say, what is the order in which I should process these costs?
And does it have the logic to? I suppose it would have. You'd have a separate policy for, in this case, SQL Server and Gold support. It would tag them. It would see them. Maybe it makes one as a priority, but at the end of the day, they both have to be added together for the final cost. Where's the
when you
the
want
logic
to,
on that?
Sure. So when you want to add costs, so probably I should take an example. Example is, let's say for having SQL Server on the VM, you want to add $50 a month, and for having, let's say, Apache Tomcat on the VM, you want to add $10 per month, right? These are additive. If a VM has both, you should basically add $50 and $10 to the VM. Hence, you just go on adding fixed costs one on top of another. So if you select the fixed rate option, so if you just select the fixed rate option, you will observe that there is no priority here because these are just additive. Yeah. But if you are changing the pricing policy altogether on how should I charge this VM based on whether it is Gold quality support or whether it is something else altogether, let's say HA enabled or something. Here, I have to decide which is the pricing policy that I use. I can't apply both.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Hence the priority exists.
Yeah. Okay. So that can get. I see. So when you're doing the provisioning of these applications, to summarize, then you would go in, you would add the necessary metadata or tag, depending on where you're doing your accounting really for all the services, and then here you can come in and select the metadata tags, pin them together as fixed rates, or use alternative pricing policies. Okay. I see the prices in USD. I assume that it can be changed to other currencies as well.
Yeah, that is one
Yes,
global setting in VROps that you have to do once when you install or configure Tenant App or you have the charging mechanism in VROps, and that's where you can find it. The Tenant App does not do, or VROps does not do any rate or currency conversation. It's just one global setting that you set once in VROps, and then this is used.
Okay. And you've also got a charged based on power state. I guess that's one of the only things we kind of know whether it, the workload itself is on or off. But what about an application service? So Tomcat, for example, on a Windows machine, you don't start the service. Is there any way to? I don't suppose there is, but is there any way to extend that capability to be a bit more sentient on understanding the status of an application like that?
So that's something
interesting question.
Yeah, that's something I don't think that's easily be doable. Well, it doesn't come out of the box because the metadata and the vCenter tags, they are just that generic. I mean, that's just text fields that you add into the metadata system. You would rather have some automation logic in the backend that checks using different ways, VMware tools or VROps agent that we have to go into the operating system, see if the actual or what processes are running there, and then defining and setting and adjusting the tags in vCenter. So I would see that as a sort of a separate component of your overall solution rather than looking for it in vRops or the Tenant App.
Yeah, I mean, just trying to
Yeah,
think.
that makes sense.
So
I'll make one more one important feature that I should talk about in vRops. Technically, that is something that we could chase because vRops has a very good app awareness story as well. So it can do certain things with an agent running inside the VM, which can tell it which are the services that are running, how long are they running, are they up or down, kind of things. It also has a few things that it can do without an agent using VMware tools. Just that we have not brought it into the pricing area of things. Right now, it only uses for the monitoring aspects of the system. Just because we have not heard too much about using the service statuses to decide your billing mechanisms, so to say. So depending on the feedback, potentially we could, but not today.
Yeah, no, understood. I'm trying to think of some additional kind of potential use cases, but I completely understand that and agree.
I think that would be rather something where we also move into more the managed services area as a provider perspective. So in this case, you would use all these application awareness story in vRops as a service provider to monitor the environment and then just offer that monitoring service to your tenants and then use the existing tag or different pricing policies for some, I'm also managing and monitoring the operating system and the applications in there, and therefore I'm going to charge you more and upsell that to the tenants.
Yeah, and at a simplistic kind of way of doing things, I could see here how, for example, you would be able to use tagging and understand what version of Windows server had been deployed, for example, and then use that to roll up your cost back to the customer and understand your SPLA licensing consumption as well, if you're not using a Microsoft product for that. Okay, and I think there's one more kind of thing to walk through. Is that rate factors?
Yeah, two. One new thing that we have in 2.4 is the one-time fixed cost. That's pretty simple. That's where you just add one-time cost on either VM creation or, again, based on metadata or tags that will be added to the bill. That is something that you can use for example, to model one-time setup fees for new VM creation, or some things where you have certain actions based on a support call or upgrade scenarios that you want to charge for the upgrade effort, something like that, where you would tag the virtual machine that you've done that and then model the one-time cost around that to add it to the bill.
Yeah, very useful for professional services or managed services, yeah.
And then, that's the rate factors. That's now another addition in Tenant App 2.4 that allows you, to model even more flexible, again, based on VCD metadata or vCenter tags, some factors that should be applied to either the total price or to prices per resource. Dada, can you give some examples for these rate factors that you've seen?
Sure, of course. And very interesting examples, right? So some providers wanted to, let us say, give out VMs for free for first 3 months. All small VMs are free for the first 3 months. Now, this is a great example of how you can employ your metadata and rate factor together to achieve such a purpose, right? So you will say that I will tag all VMs that I want to provide on promo using a metadata called promo equal to true for 3 months, first 3 months, and then I'll remove that metadata. Yeah. What you will do here is you come here and say, if promo equal to true, then apply a factor of 0. What this means on the total price. What this means is after the total price is computed, you multiply it by 0, essentially turning the price of the VM to 0, right? You could use it the other way around as well, which is all the VMs that are backup enabled, if I'm tagging them saying that these VMs are backup enabled, then apply a factor of 2 on their storage charge so that you double their storage cost, right? If backup equal to true, here you come and say for the price of storage, apply a factor of 2, right? Now, that would be an example where you double of storage for all VMs that have enabled. So you could use it in several different ways. To where you do not want to create whole new pricing policies altogether, just want to give 50% discount or 20% premium. Those are the sort of use cases that you can use this for.
Understood. So this will work on any of the metadata that you've got in VCD or vCenter, and you've got different.
Yeah, it's very generic, and you need to think about the the backend logic to let's say translate the actual service or the actual addition that you want to charge for, and how you model that in the metadata, and then how to set these metadata or tags in an automatic fashion, and then you can model it in the pricing policy. So that means, on the other hand, also you can charge and model quite everything because you can translate quite everything into these metadata or tags that you can then add into the pricing policy.
And what would be the output? So obviously the output here is a number, a value, a dollar value at the end of all of the filtering, if you like, that's gone on through the pricing policy. So as the actual unit of consumption falls through the pricing policy logic, there's going to be a number kind of presented at the end. So from an integration standpoint, what is the end result that you get from this? Do you get just the value? Do you get the value and the units consumed and the metadata for all the tags? What does the end kind of output look like?
So in this case, we are talking about, let me just finish this one here. We are talking about the details that then actually make up some bills and the details that you can see in the bills. Right now, in my demo environment, I don't have any bills generated to show you, but I think in the bill section where you can see the information, it is broken down into the different objects. So you can see for your whole org-VDC, first of all, the different resources with CPU, memory, and storage that add up to the bill, but it also gets finer granular down to the individual virtual machines and VApps, and then you can see the total number for the VMs, I think even broken down into the different resources. Data, I'm not sure if different metadatas or metadata tags and how they sort of add to the bill are explicitly shown in the bill overview right now.
No, not today. I think I have a system where I can probably show an example of how a bill looks like. It can basically give you a hierarchy of all the way from what are the charges at an org-VDC level, how are they constituted from the underlying VApps, and how are the VApp charges constituted from the underlying VMs, and how are the VM charges themselves memory charges. So everything we talked about metadata falls under additional charges. CPU falls under CPU, memory, storage, and so on.
That's great, and I suppose what you can also see is the billing policy that was used, or the pricing policy that was used. Yeah. In some cases where for example, you've got a discount going on, it's useful to see the before and after kind of costs. So you can present to the customer, well, here's your bill, but here's the cost without the discount, and here's the cost now that you're paying to us. Is that equally information that comes out, or would that then be a separate pricing policy where you could work out what the cost would be without discount and cost with discount?
Yeah, as of today, it's the second option, which is you will have to probably create two different pricing policies to do that. But what comes out is the usage along with what you have been charged for, so that you can correlate on whether I've got a discount or not.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Do you want me to quickly show a sample bill that I have on my environment?
Go for it if you've got one ready to rock and roll.
Do you see the screen now?
It's just coming. Yep, now I see it.
So you see the different bills that are generated in this environment and all of them having different costs. I'll pick up one of them and I'll say view. And this information is what is available through the API as well. So it says what was the bill, which was the pricing policy that was used, what's the model of this. So this bill is generated on one of the org VDCs. It says which is the org VDC, what is the type, what is the total cost. And you can see there is a summary which breaks it up into how is this bill coming up to this cost of 3,287. So what is the memory cost? What is the CPU cost? What is the storage cost? And then it breaks it down in the another level of slicing, which are the VApps that are under this org VDC, and how do they sum up to this total of 3,287. So this is all the compute and the storage cost together, media, template files, independent disks, and so on. You can potentially go into individual VApps and get this level of detail, which says what is the charge for. So you can see CPU, memory, cost coming from storage, one-time costs, VM creation, so the one-time setup fees, the cost due to sizing policies, the costs due to metadata. All of these splits are available within the bill.
Brilliant. That's plenty of detail there, I think, for a bill. That's more than enough. Okay, brilliant. Well, Data, I mean, unless there's anything else to show, I think that's a really good rundown on the pricing policies themselves and how now you can really differentiate your pricing a lot easier. And thanks to the information you guys provided, it's clear in my mind how I can use Tenant App to start calculating some bills and provide that information to my existing billing system, or start using that as the billing source. Is there any further comments before we wrap up, guys?
Yeah,
I would like to.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Yarek.
Okay, so one thing that with all the new flexibility and the power that we have in the Tenant App 2.4, you can go very crazy about the different things that you want to model with all the generic metadata and one-time costs and slabs and ratios that you can attach to the cost. My recommendation, and also what we got as working with different partners, is an idea to start simple, to make sure to understand how the Tenant App works and how these pricing policies actually get the metric and get them into the bill, perhaps using this, just using one as a rate and see the actual values in the bill. And then from there, slowly grow, adding the complexity to model your services, not to get too deep and buried into the details from the beginning and losing sight.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I mean, as with any orchestration and workflow engine, right, you kind of want to take baby steps and make sure it's doing the right thing in the right predicted way each time. Is it better than, in your opinion, where you've got all of those kind of like add blocks where you can add things in, would it be better to have separate policies for each thing, or keep them contained in one?
I think that mainly depends on your business model and how flexible you need many of these different options to the same org VDC, because that's sort of the granularity where you attach the pricing policy to. And
where's the processing take place, out of interest, for the actual bill runs?
The processing that takes place, in the VROps and the Tenant App, but all the information is stored in vRealize about the pricing policies and the metrics that are used for the bill generation.
I'm just wondering if you get to some fairly large, complex, policies that are doing a lot of things, where the impact on processing would be, and how often does this run its billing cycle?
That's something you can configure. So bills can be scheduled. I'm not sure, well, we haven't done it at this time, but when you create a bill, you can either create a bill manually and select the time frame that you want to have for this bill generation, or you can schedule the bill generation, or of course trigger it externally from via API.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Jörg. And Darcy, you wanted to have a finishing say? something last from you?
Sure. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. There was just one last piece that I wanted to talk about because many providers have asked us about this as well. When charging for network bandwidth, especially, there are many different ways that service providers take. The most aggressive form of pricing is to charge for the peak network bandwidth that is used by a tenant over a period of time. The most conservative is to use for the average bandwidth that is used by the tenant. There is a midway between these two called the 95th percentile billing, wherein basically you knock off the top 5% of their bandwidth consumption. Whatever remains at the top is what you charge for. Many providers have asked us specifically for this feature before 2.4. So that got added into advanced network pricing. We did not really go into that in the demo. We just wanted to make a note because I'm sure you will hear about it. You will talk partners.
Yeah, it's one I have heard about that before, and yeah, it is one of the curiosities of network charging. That 95th percentile seems to be a very common thing. It must work out well for the provider in that respect, but I can see how it's also working out better for the customer. Like you say, it's not as expensive as a full peak charge.
Yep.
Cool. Well, listen, guys, thank you again for all of the information you provided today. Data, thanks for dropping on and showing us around your reports, and thanks for giving us access to your system and the great explanation, guys. Thank you.
Thanks.